Stockholm is a city that teaches you to trust systems. The water is measured and edged by stone. The street grid feels negotiated rather than accidental. Even the winter light looks regulated, rationed. And beneath that surface, the Stockholm Metro, Stockholm's tunnelbana, does what it was built to do. It carries people efficiently through rock, through darkness, through years. It began with a tunnel that was not yet a metro. In the early 1930s, the city approved and then dug the Södertunneln tram tunnel under Södermalm, an underground passage with stations whose purpose was practical, not mythic. It opened in 1933, and the name Tunnelbanan first took hold around this work, along with the blue T that still marks entrances above ground. Then in 1941, Stockholm City Council voted to develop a full-scale metro system, and in 1944, the decision hardened into infrastructure. Platform lengths were increased to take longer trains, and central segments were built with 4 tracks instead of 2 to meet a future that planners could already see coming. The first metro line opened in 1950. What followed was expansion by decades. Green Line routes in the 1950s, Red Line opening in 1964, Blue Line in 1975. Newer segments cut deeper, tunneled more, leaving less daylight and more rock behind the walls. Today, the network is a measured thing. 3 colored lines, a centralized geometry that funnels routes through the city center, with T-Centralen as the main interchange. It is also immense in use, hundreds of millions of passenger journeys in a year, so routine that the individual human presence becomes a blur. The metro has been described as the world's longest art gallery, and the stations, especially on the Blue Line, often expose raw bedrock as a design choice. Crude surfaces, blasted rock, the refusal to pretend the city is not built inside stone. And yet, the strongest stories Stockholm tells about its metro are not about art or engineering ambition or civic pride. They are about something that appears rarely, late and without announcement. A pale train, unpainted, moving through the same tunnels as the regular fleet, and remembered not because it was impossible, but because it was real. In Swedish, it is called silverpillen, the silver arrow. The origin is not ancient, it is not medieval, it does not rise from folklore older than the rails. It begins in the middle of the 20th century, in a city that was still building its modern identity. In 1965, Stockholm's metro purchased 8 unpainted aluminum train cars. They were meant as a test, cheaper than the standard green cars then common in service. The logic was straightforward. If an expanding transit system could accept a less expensive exterior finish and a slightly different build, future procurement could be more cost-effective. But when those unpainted cars entered the system, they created a visual event. In a fleet of green, a silver train is not subtle. It turns every platform into an observation point. People notice it because they must. It was not only the color. The cars were of a slightly different design. The doors slid open on the outside of the train, changing the interior space and the way the train looked when it stopped. The interiors were missing the ordinary clutter of public transport. No familiar advertisements, fewer surface markers, fewer cues that remind a rider they are still in the commercial, supervised world. Even the cleanliness was wrong in a specific way. The silver cars were sometimes dirtier, bearing traces where graffiti had been removed, leaving a kind of scarring that looked less like vandalism and more like erasure. The train was not regularly scheduled the way commuters understand the schedule. It appeared as backup, as overflow relief, as a piece of rolling stock the system could deploy when needed. That unpredictability is essential. A thing you cannot anticipate becomes a thing you remember too clearly. At first, the unease was social, not supernatural. Stockholmers reportedly disliked the raw look. The aluminum read as unfinished. The absence of paint suggested austerity, compromise, a public service stripped down. People in cities learn what neglect looks like. They avoid it when they can. But the city also learns how to turn objects into symbols. Over time, Silverpillen became more than an unusual train. It became a mechanism for fear because it occupied a space where fear is already structurally plausible. Underground transit is enclosed, loud, indifferent, and not easily escaped. The legend that grew around the train is consistent in its central claim. If you board it, you do not arrive correctly. You travel and never get out. The details shift, but the pressure remains the same. Movement without resolution, an engineered system that refuses its contract with the passenger. Ethnologist Bengt of Klintberg collected variants of the story and noted recurring motifs. The train seen after midnight, the sense that it stops only rarely, the passengers described with vacant expressions, the implication that time behaves incorrectly for the person who takes a seat and expects to stand again a minute later. The fear here is not theatrical, it is administrative. It is the fear of entering a system and finding the rules no longer apply. Every metro legend needs geography, not just a vehicle. Stockholm provided it. In the early 1970s, the metro expanded again. The Blue Line opened in 1975, and with it came new construction on the northwest routes. Among the structures built during that period was Kimlinga Station. It was completed to a degree that makes the word abandoned feel inadequate. Platforms, concrete, a station body that exists in the chain of the line. Yet it never opened to passengers because the surrounding development plans did not materialize. The station remained unused, a sealed room inside an active transport artery. This is a particular kind of place, not a ruin reclaimed by nature, not a station closed after serving a neighborhood, but an almost finished promise that was never delivered. Left in place should feelings ever change, as one account puts it, which is another way of saying it was cheaper to leave it than to undo it. Kimlinga's physical character matters, bare, unadorned, without the advertisements and signage that soften other stations. It does not participate in the metro's public face. It is infrastructure without social permission. It did not take long for a saying to attach itself to that place. Only the dead get off at Kimlinga. The line between joke and warning is thin in public space. Repeat a phrase long enough and it becomes the way a city thinks. Then the two stories fused, train and station, Silverpylon and Kimlinga, until they became difficult to separate. A white or silver train that appears without warning needs a destination that is equally discontinuous with normal life. A never-opened station needs a reason to be remembered. Together, they form a closed circuit, the train that should not be there and the place you should not arrive.
There is a second reason the story persists. It is not only that the train existed or that Kimlinga exists. It is that the Stockholm metro itself supports the psychology of the legend. The system runs early morning to late night, with extended service on some nights. It is centrally routed, it is largely underground in key segments, and it is built in stages, with older sections using different construction approaches than newer ones. The network contains connections to depots and the broader rail system. Trains run empty at times. They appear and vanish from public view in ways that ordinary riders do not have to understand. In other words, the metro naturally produces moments that look like anomalies. A quiet train passing through, a platform where a door never opens, a tunnel window showing an unfinished wall, a station name that never appears on a map in the way riders expect, a maintenance run with no passengers, a backup train that no one has seen in years. The story of the white ghost train is not a story that requires belief in the supernatural. It requires only the admission that large systems have hidden states, modes the public does not witness, and that sometimes those modes leak into view. The camera perspective, if this were filmed, would linger on normal surfaces first. Tile, fluorescent light, the polished predictability of an interchange station. Then it would follow the line outward, deeper, quieter. The sound would change as the crowd thins. Footsteps become singular. The air cools. The rails begin to sound like they are speaking to themselves. And somewhere in that emptier part of the network, between the ordinary stations that do open and the one that never did, people say they still see it.
A pale train, unpainted, unmarked, sliding through the tunnels with the logic of something that still belongs to the system, even if the system insists it does not. The Stockholm Metro is engineered to reduce uncertainty. The entire system is a controlled environment: standardized track gauge, third rail electrification, regulated headways, a centralized network that compresses the city into timed intervals. Even the driver's work is bounded by safety systems that continuously compare permitted speed against actual speed and will brake automatically if the limit is exceeded. It is not a chaotic space, it is a managed one. And yet, the most endurable fear connected to the metro is not about derailment or fire or collapse. It is about an error in the simplest promise public transport makes: that you will arrive where you intend to arrive. To understand why the Silver Pill story lodged so deeply, you have to look at the way metro systems actually function when they are not performing for passengers. A passenger sees a train as a discrete event. It appears, it opens, it closes, it leaves. But an operator sees a train as a rolling asset, a unit that must be staged, moved, inspected, repositioned, repaired, and sometimes sent through the network empty. The metro contains depots, connections, sightings, and operational patterns that are invisible by design. The public is not supposed to notice them, because noticing them would mean noticing how much of the system is not built for them. Stockholm's older rolling stock, collectively referred to as the SLCX series, covering types C1 through C15, served from 1950 until their final withdrawal in 2024. These cars evolved across decades, but they shared a baseline logic: interoperability, consistent formations, a predictable length of a full train, around 140 meters, moving on a third rail system. Within that family, the C5 stands apart. The C5 was a prototype set built in the mid-1960s. Only one set existed, consisting of 8 cars. Its most visible difference was its unpainted aluminum exterior. Its doors were outlying sliding doors, an engineering choice that changes how the train reads visually on a platform. It is one of the few real-world details that the legend preserves correctly, because it is the detail a frightened commuter would remember without intending to. The aluminum body mattered in ways that are not mystical. Paint is not only color, it is also a layer that makes surfaces uniform, hides repairs, conceals the small imperfections that accumulate as a vehicle ages. Bare metal does not forgive. It reflects fluorescent light harshly. It shows every stain and abrasion. In tunnels, where light is already artificial and sparse, the reflective body does something else. It turns the environment back on itself, as if the train is returning the tunnel's light rather than receiving it. The interior mattered too, because it disrupted expectation. The Atlas Obscura account notes the absence of the usual advertisements and the different interior layout, and it describes the interior as dirtier in a specific way, marked by partially removed graffiti, giving an impression of something more dystopian. That word is not the language of ghosts. It is the language of social systems failing quietly. The fear comes from the suggestion that something in the normal maintenance contract has been violated. In a metro system, the most unsettling objects are often the ones that look slightly wrong but still function. A broken escalator is inconvenient. An escalator that runs but grinds, or runs too slowly, or runs with a rhythmic shudder, those are the things that make people look down and imagine the machinery beneath their feet. Silver Pylon was that kind of object. Its appearance was intermittent. It was not the train you saw every morning and learned to ignore. It was the train that replaced the familiar one when the system was under strain: rush hours, disruptions, overload. It was also, according to the broader historical framing, used as a backup and sometimes moved without stopping at stations. The CX article notes that the train sometimes ran empty to and from the depot without stopping. Even if you never stepped inside, you could see it pass. You could be forced to register it without understanding why it was there. This is where the story begins to deepen into something more technical and therefore more disturbing. A passenger's relationship to the metro is almost entirely built on trust in signals, both literal signals and social ones. The train stops where trains stop. The doors open when doors open. The station names appear where station names appear. When something violates one of those cues, the passenger has no replacement framework. They cannot diagnose what they are seeing. They can only feel the loss of certainty. The legend reflects that loss. Its central image is not a monster. It is a normal train behaving in a way that normal trains should not behave. In the variants recorded and repeated across decades, the silver train appears late at night, often after midnight. It is sometimes described as stopping only once a year or appearing only rarely. The passengers, when there are passengers, are described with expressionless faces, vacant looks. The train's threat is not violence, it is displacement. Time lost, memory interrupted, destination denied.
This legend attached itself to a system that, in the 1970s, was expanding into deeper tunnels and new stations built in exposed rock. The Blue Line, opened in 1975, is almost entirely tunneled, and its stations, many of them left with bedrock exposed, are visually different from older tiled stations. In one sense, the Metro's aesthetic choices made it famous. In another, they normalized the feeling of being inside an unfinished excavation. It is in this period that Kimling becomes crucial. Kimling Station was constructed as part of the Blue Line expansion, intended to serve an area that planners expected to redevelop. The redevelopment did not happen. The station, largely built, remained unopened, indefinitely delayed. It sits on an active line, visible if you know where to look. After leaving Hallenbergen on the way to Akalla, the station can be seen from the train window. It can also be reached on foot from nearby areas, though it is usually locked. There are two realities in that description that do not sit comfortably together. One is that the station is not a myth, it is physically there. The other is that the station is not meant to be interacted with. It is present, but inaccessible, like a sealed room in a building you occupy every day. That is an ideal environment for pattern making. When a commuter hears the phrase, "Only the dead get off at Kimling," they may laugh, because laughter is the socially acceptable response to a fear that cannot be addressed practically. But the phrase also performs a function. It marks Kimling as an exception. It tells you that the ordinary rules of the system do not apply there. In the legend's most commonly repeated narrative, a young woman boards a silver-white train late at night. The passengers look strange. She intends to get off at T-Centralen, but the train does not stop. Even pulling an emergency brake does not restore control. When it finally stops, it is at Kimling. The other passengers pass through a locked door and disappear. She is later found dead or traumatized in the woods near Ursvik. This story is repeated in multiple tellings and is explicitly tied to both the Silver Train and the Ghost Station. There is a reason this narrative resonates even with people who do not believe in ghosts. It is because it frames the metro as a system that can override individual agency. You cannot force the doors to open. You cannot make the train stop correctly. You can pull an emergency mechanism and still be ignored. In real operation, this is not impossible as a sensation. Emergency brakes in modern rail systems do not always perform the way lay people imagine. They can trigger alarms, braking sequences, communication protocols, responses that depend on context and may not produce an immediate dramatic stop at speed in a tunnel. The passenger understands emergency brake as a direct physical intervention. The system understands it as a signal to be managed. The legend exploits that mismatch, but it does not invent it. The overlooked flaws, the early warnings, the strange patterns, these emerge not from supernatural claims, but from the way complex infrastructure behaves when it is stressed or when it is operating outside passenger hours. Silver Pylon's rarity was not a mystery to operators. It was a train used differently. But commuters did not have that explanation. They only saw a silver set appear unexpectedly, with a stripped interior, and then vanish for months or years. The story filled the gap. Even the physical sound of a train can become part of a myth when it is unfamiliar. Klintberg's summary, cited in the Wikipedia account, notes that the legends likely arose because the C5 cars were rare in traffic and were considered to have a ghost-like sound in tunnels, especially when running at night. Sound is one of the strongest triggers for unease underground. It arrives before you see the train. It reverberates in ways that flatten distance, and it makes the tunnel feel occupied before it is. The metro is a place where you often hear what you cannot yet identify: a vibration in the platform, a tremor in the air, a metallic resonance that could be a train approaching, or could be something else moving behind walls. In Stockholm, the Blue Line's deeper rock tunnels and exposed bedrock stations intensify this. Rock does not absorb sound the way softer materials do. It reflects and carries it. It makes the system feel alive in a way that is not comforting. And Kimlinge, bare concrete, never opened, functions like a cavity in that living body, a place where sound can travel, where emptiness is architectural, where the train you are on might slow slightly, and your eyes might catch the outline of a platform you were not expecting to see. It is not difficult to imagine how sightings begin. A driver runs an empty set through for repositioning, a backup train is dispatched late, a passenger glimpses silver metal and peripheral light, but the mind files it as white. A station window frames an unfinished platform at the exact moment fatigue makes perception unreliable. None of this requires fiction to be plausible. It requires only the acknowledgement that perception underground is fragile and that large systems produce edge cases, moments when the public accidentally witnesses operations meant to remain unseen. By the 1970s, the legend was widespread. It moved across generations. It became something that everyone knows, especially younger people hearing it as a warning. The train was still in use for years after the legend took hold. According to the Atlas Obscura account, silver peeling continued in the metro until 1995 or 1996, when it was decommissioned and the cars were split up. That detail should have ended the story. It did not, because what persisted was not the physical train alone. What persisted was the idea that the system contains hidden trains, hidden stations, and hidden permissions, and that under the right conditions, those hidden elements can surface. The deeper you look into the technical reality of the metro, the more you understand the legend's durability. The Stockholm Metro is not a single uniform machine. It is a layered system built over decades with older and newer segments, different standards, different signaling histories, different rolling stock eras, and a daily cycle of public service and nighttime work. In that cycle, there are hours when the metro belongs not to passengers, but to maintenance crews, to training exercises, to movements of equipment. There is documented mention of a C5 half train being moved to the Stockholm Police Academy for training purposes in handling crime on metro cars. The physical car becomes a staged environment for simulated emergencies. A train car meant for transit becomes a rehearsal space for violence and response. This matters because it shows how the system's artifacts continue to exist in fragments, repurposed, relocated, and partially concealed. The public does not see where the old cars go. They simply stop seeing them in service. The disappearance itself becomes evidence, in the emotional logic of rumor, that something has been concealed rather than retired. Kimlinge remains in place, and the phrase about the dead remains attached to it. The silver train legend, built on a real prototype train, remains attached to the city's nighttime imagination. And from here, the story moves into its darkest period. Not the period when the legend became entertaining, but the period when the metro's technical reality and human error began to produce the kinds of incidents that do not need supernatural framing to feel like a curse. There is a point where a system stops being an abstraction and becomes a lived environment. For Stockholm's metro, that point is not the opening ceremonies of 1950 or the completion of the Blue Line in 1975. It is the late-night platform, when the timetable thins and the crowd collapses into a few isolated bodies. In that hour, the metro is not public transportation, it is an underground space that happens to be functioning. The silver pillen story hardens in those hours because the metro, at night, produces a different kind of evidence. Not official reports, not press releases, small observations, incomplete accounts, the remembered sequence of doors and lights, the sound of a train arriving when no train is due. Ethnologist Bengt af Klintberg noted that one version of the silver pillen legend describes a person who intended to travel to the next station but remained seated for a week. Another describes the train as appearing only after midnight, stopping only once per year, and carrying passengers with vacant expressions. These are not the details of a normal rumor about an accident. They are details about time distortion and psychological rupture. They describe the fear of being absorbed into the system and returned incorrectly. But if you talk to people who work around metro systems, drivers, maintenance staff, depot workers, you encounter a different layer of unease. It is less poetic. It is not about the underworld. It is about edge cases, situations where the system behaves lawfully, but not in the way a passenger expects. The Stockholm Metro is built to run early morning to late night, with extended service on weekends. It is also built to be maintained, and maintenance requires windows of time when the system is quieter or partially closed. Trains move to depots, trains run empty, systems are tested, signals are verified. This is not folklore. It is the operational reality that makes folklore credible. The C5 train, silver pillen in its physical form, was known to be rare in traffic and to have operated primarily as backup. The SLCX documentation notes that it was rarely used in regular passenger service, most commonly seen during rush hours and at night on the red and green lines, and that it sometimes ran empty to and from the depot without stopping at stations. An empty train at night is not frightening because it is supernatural. It is frightening because it is a vehicle designed for people moving without people inside it, as if the system is exercising its own muscles. When the silver pillen story describes a train that appears unpredictably, it is borrowing the logic of that operational reality. When it describes the interior as lacking advertisements, it is borrowing what made the real train distinct. When it describes the sensation that it doesn't stop, it is borrowing the feeling of watching an out-of-service train pass through stations with closed doors. That is the first escalation, the realization that the legend is stitched directly to things the metro actually does. The second escalation comes from the geography of Kimlinge. Kimlinge Station, built but never put into service, is real. It sits on the Blue Line, visible from the train after leaving Hollenbergen toward Akalla. It is usually locked. It is described as a structure left in place should plans ever revive. That means it is not merely abandoned, it is maintained at a minimal level of existence. It remains part of the system's body. A station that exists but does not open creates a unique psychological condition. It is a destination that is not meant to be reached. It is a node in the network that rejects passengers by policy. And yet, trains pass it. The tunnel lights spill across a platform that no one is waiting on. From inside a moving train, you can see an outline of doors and concrete, and your mind will try to interpret it as a normal station because that is what your mind does in systems. The moment you realize it is not normal, you have already seen enough to feel the anomaly. The legend's most repeated narrative places a young woman on the silver train. The train does not stop at T-Centralen, it stops at Kimlinge. The other passengers walk through locked doors. She is later found dead or traumatized in the nearby woods of Ursvik. This story is retold as a warning and as an explanation for the phrase, "Only the dead get off at Kimlinge." The disturbing detail here is not the locked door. It is the implication that a locked door is irrelevant once you are inside the system's wrong mode. A door that blocks the living does not block what the system has already categorized as cargo. In the darker accounts that circulate among riders, the train is sometimes empty. That emptiness is treated as a sign that it is there to pick up someone. The variation is documented as part of the broader legend framework. If the train is empty, it means it has arrived for you. The threat is not an attacker. The threat is selection. Selection is a uniquely modern fear. It is what people feel when their number is called by a queuing system, when their name appears on a screen, when a security gate refuses to open. It is the fear of being singled out by an impersonal process. And underground, that fear amplifies. By the time the Blue Line opened, Stockholm's metro stations, especially the newer ones, were increasingly carved from rock, with exposed bedrock as part of the station identity. The system leaned into the geology. It did not hide that you were underground. That aesthetic has been celebrated as art. But the same aesthetic, at night, produces the sensation of being inside a controlled cave, lit, surveilled, but fundamentally indifferent. This is the environment in which disturbing accounts take root, because the environment itself cooperates. A train arrives, the sound precedes it, a resonance carried by rock. The platform lights reflect off metal. If the train body is pale, the light behaves differently. It feels colder, flatter. The doors slide and the interior is not broken, but wrong, emptier, stripped of signage. A passenger who has heard the story might hesitate because the story has taught them that hesitation is survival. But the metro does not wait for your myth. It waits for your body. One of the most effective aspects of the Silver Peelin legend is that it does not require extraordinary events. It requires only a plausible misalignment. You step into the wrong train when you are tired, alone, and trying to get home. This is why the darkest period of the story is not a single night. It is a span of years in which the real Silver Peelin existed and moved through the system, while the legend about it grew in parallel.
The Atlas Obscura account dates the beginning of the poltergeist locomotive story to 1965, the year the aluminum cars were purchased, and notes that by the 1970s, the legend was widespread and growing. That means there was a decade where sightings could be real, misinterpreted, or deliberately dramatized, and no one could cleanly separate the categories. If you want to understand how legends survive in modern infrastructure, that decade matters more than any later retelling, because it is the period when evidence was available but ambiguous. People did not need to invent a silver train, they needed only to assign meaning to one. And meaning tends to attach itself most strongly to overlooked flaws. One flaw is that passengers often do not know what they are looking at. Stockholm's metro has different rolling stock types and liveries across eras. The system has been modernized, refurbished, and expanded. The public experience is designed to be seamless, but the infrastructure is not seamless. It is layered. When something appears that looks old, unpainted, or unfamiliar, the rider cannot place it historically. They can only place it emotionally. Another flaw is that the metro's hidden operations leak into public perception. A train running empty to or from a depot can appear to ignore stations. A station built but never opened can appear to be a place the system is hiding. A backup train used irregularly can appear to choose the night it shows itself. And a third flaw is more subtle. The system's very efficiency can create the feeling that it is autonomous. In the central legend summarized by Atlas Obscura, you just traveled and traveled and traveled and never got out. The horror is monotony. The train does not crash, it does not explode. It simply continues, as if the system has entered a loop and the passenger has become an unacknowledged variable. That fear has a mechanical analog, a process that cannot be interrupted because the interruption protocol is not designed for you. In the standard girl story, she pulls an emergency brake and it does not stop the train at T Centralen. This detail is repeated across tellings. Whether it aligns with technical reality is less important than what it expresses. The belief that even an emergency mechanism is subordinate to the system's larger logic. This is how modern horror emerges from realism, not by adding monsters, but by removing the assumption that the system answers to you. The silver pylon cars remained in use until 1995 or 1996, when they were decommissioned and split up. This is a documented endpoint for the physical train and passenger service. In theory, the story should weaken after that. The object that anchored it would be gone. But instead, the story changed shape. It moved from sightings of a specific train to sightings of a category, a pale train that appears when it should not. It became less about the mid-1960s prototype and more about the idea that the metro still contained something unaccounted for. And the metro provided new evidence of that idea through what happened to the remnants. According to Atlas Obscura, half of one of the trains was moved to the Stockholm Police Academy and used as a training setting to teach cadets how to police crime on the metro. Another car is kept at the manufacturer's headquarters, preserved, repurposed, even fitted with a cafeteria at one point. This is not secrecy, it is ordinary institutional reuse. But it has the effect of scattering the body of the train into private spaces, places the public cannot casually enter. When a public object is removed from public view in pieces, it invites the simplest suspicion that something is being hidden. By the late 1990s and into the 2000s, younger writers who never saw the original silver pylon in service still heard about it. Klintberg himself, cited by Atlas Obscura, acknowledged the persistence of the rumor among young people even after the cars were taken out of service. The legend became intergenerational memory attached to infrastructure. This is the darkest period in a documentary sense, when the system is modernizing, when the original artifact is being removed, and when the story begins to function like a psychological residue that the city cannot clean off the walls. Because you can repaint a train, you can retire it, you can lock a station, but you cannot fully control what a population does with the knowledge that a place exists in their daily route and is not meant for them.
The official end of the silver pylon story is clean on paper. A prototype train is built, used, and eventually removed from service. A station is constructed and not opened. The metro continues operating. Stockholm continues expanding. The city continues to trust its systems. But real endings in infrastructure are rarely clean because infrastructure does not disappear. It is repurposed, dismantled, stored, renamed, and quietly folded into new work. Silver Pylon, both the physical train and the legend, survived its own decommissioning because it never depended solely on the presence of a single set of cars. It depended on the existence of hidden states within the metro system, and those hidden states remain. When the C5 cars were finally decommissioned in the mid-1990s and split up, that was not a disappearance in the way a person understands disappearance. It was a redistribution. According to Atlas Obscura, parts of the train continued to exist in different institutional contexts. One portion used at the Stockholm Police Academy as a training environment for policing incidents on metro trains, and another preserved at the manufacturer's facilities, even repurposed with a cafeteria installed inside. This is mundane. It is also deeply unsettling when you consider what it implies. A metro car is designed to be a moving public room. When it is cut out of the network and placed inside a training institution, it becomes a simulation of violence and response. It becomes a place where people rehearse the possibility that something will go wrong in a confined vehicle underground. It becomes a sealed chamber where fear is practiced professionally. The public sees none of this. They only know that the train is gone, and yet parts of it still exist. Keimlingay, meanwhile, remains exactly what it has been for decades, built but not used. It is sometimes described as abandoned, but it is more accurately delayed indefinitely. That indefinite delay is what gives it its permanence. A truly abandoned structure decays and collapses, or is demolished. An indefinitely delayed station is maintained at the level of continued possibility. It waits. It does not become history. And trains continue to pass it. This is why the legend does not fade, because every day the metro performs the same contradiction. It moves passengers through a corridor that contains a station they are not allowed to enter. Stockholm's metro is a system built in layers, with different eras of construction and evolving standards. The older sections that became the Green Line opened piece by piece through the 1950s. The Red Line opened in 1964, and the Blue Line opened in 1975, and is almost entirely tunneled, reflecting stricter construction requirements over time. The network is centralized around T-Centralen, and it contains depots and operational connections that allow trains to be moved in ways passengers do not track.
A legend like Silverpeelen lives comfortably in a layered system because layers create gaps, spaces where knowledge is uneven, where the public understands the surface and operators understand the underside. The story also persists because it has always been unusually honest about its own components. Unlike many urban legends, it is built on real objects, a real unpainted aluminum prototype train from the 1960s and a real never-opened station on the Blue Line. Mental Floss points out that what makes the story wonderful, in the sense of folkloric durability, is that the major pieces are real. People do not have to invent the setting, they only have to interpret it. Interpretation is where the horror remains. After the Silverpeelen cars left passenger service, the legend shifted from a specific identification, that exact train, to a broader category, a pale train that appears when conventional trains have stopped, or appears without warning, or appears in sections of track where no train should be. That shift is psychologically important. A specific object can be disproven by archival records, a category cannot. If you tell a commuter in 2026 that the C5 prototype was decommissioned decades ago, they may accept it. But if you tell them that the metro still runs empty sets at night, still conducts maintenance moves, still stages equipment in tunnels, still passes Kimlingy, still contains older service patterns and newer ones overlapping, then the commuter can still believe they saw something pale move through the system, because the system still contains circumstances where such a sight is plausible. The horror becomes administrative rather than paranormal, the feeling that something in the system is not meant to be seen and that you briefly saw it anyway. A documentary would treat that carefully because the line between myth and operational reality is thin here, and it does not need to be crossed to create dread. The dread is already embedded in the metro's daily structure. Consider what the system asks of you. You descend below street level, often far below. The stations, particularly on the Blue Line, are carved into rock, with exposed bedrock as part of the environment. The sound is contained, the air is conditioned and sometimes stale. The lighting is artificial and steady. Your phone signal may weaken, your sense of direction compresses into the sequence of stations. You surrender navigation to signage and announcements. You surrender timing to the timetable. You surrender safety to protocols you do not see, continuous signal safety systems, automatic braking, operational rules that keep trains separated at speed. Most of the time, this surrender feels normal. That is what public infrastructure is for, to make surrender comfortable. But a single anomaly, an unexpected train, a platform you did not know existed, a station without signs, a run that does not stop, can reverse the feeling instantly. The same surrender becomes helplessness. That reversal is what the Silverpeelen story preserves. It is also what Kimlingy preserves, because Kimlingy is not a legend, it is a hole in the public map. The Atlas Obscura description tells you how to see it. Look out the window after leaving Hollenbergen on the way to Akalla. The station can be reached on foot from nearby areas, though it is usually locked. The instructions are mundane, but the effect is not. The effect is to invite the public to witness something they are not meant to use. This is how infrastructure becomes psychologically haunted without the need for supernatural claims. The city contains spaces that exist but are not for you, and it does not fully explain why. In the Wikipedia summary of the Silver Pylon legend, the story is described as one of several ghost phenomena surrounding the Stockholm metro, with Silver Pylon the most famous. The same text notes the association with Kimlinge, describing the station as unfinished and consisting of bare concrete foundations, popularly called the station where only the dead get off. Even that phrasing, bare concrete foundations, is important. It points back to the aesthetic of unfinishedness, of exposure, of being inside something that was built quickly or left incomplete. It mirrors the visual shock of the unpainted train itself. Aftermath in a case like this is not about police tape or a single catastrophic event. It is about institutional silence. No transit authority needs to issue a statement denying a ghost train. The system does not respond to rumors. It responds to maintenance schedules and procurement contracts. And when the public tries to make sense of what it sees, the system's refusal to engage feels like confirmation. Not confirmation of ghosts, confirmation that the system's truth is not meant to be legible. That is why the legend remains strongest among people who are young enough not to have seen the original Silver Pylon. Bengt of Klintberg, cited by Atlas Obscura, observed that the rumor survived the train's removal from service and continued especially among young people. It is not a first-hand memory, it is inherited unease. Inherited unease behaves differently from ordinary storytelling. It is not told as entertainment. It is told as a warning embedded in casual conversation. Don't get on the wrong train late at night. Don't linger alone. Don't trust that every station is meant for you. Remember that there are doors in this system that do not open. When people say they still see the white ghost train, they are not necessarily describing a single preserved artifact moving through tunnels decades after decommissioning. They are describing the sensation of being in a place where the difference between scheduled service and hidden operations can appear in a fraction of a second, and where that difference can feel like being watched by the system itself. A pale train sliding through a station without stopping is enough. A platform glimpsed in passing, empty and unmarked, is enough. A locked station visible through a window existing without permission is enough. The lasting psychological presence of Silver Pylon is not a ghost. It is a question that cannot be closed by decommissioning paperwork. What else runs through the metro that you are not meant to board? The Stockholm metro continues to expand. It continues to modernize. But its architecture remains the same fundamental arrangement. Humans moving through rock and metal rooms, guided by signals and trust. And in that arrangement, the most unsettling idea is not that something supernatural lives underground. It is that the system is large enough to contain events you cannot verify, and ordinary enough that those events can happen without leaving a trace you can hold. The city above remains composed. The water keeps its edges. The streets keep their order. Below, trains continue to move. And sometimes, in the peripheral vision of someone waiting too late, a pale body of metal passes through light, unpainted, unadvertised, empty or unreadable, and the person feels, for a moment, that they have seen the metro in a mode that does not include them.